Hello, everybody. It's Talox Jorisk coming at you fresh out of A Quiet Place Day 1. Went and saw it last night during the premiere showings, and it was incredible. If you haven't seen the movie yet, please go see it. It is the best so far Quiet Place movie, as well as, just being one of the best movies of 2024 for me so far. I've really been on a rock and roller coaster when it comes to films this year, and I was really hoping this one would be good, and it did not disappoint at all. It was phenomenal. So please go see the movie if you haven't already. I might also be talking about spoilers at the end of the video for the film, so just beware of that. And for most of the video, I'm going to be talking about A Quiet Place: The Road Ahead, which is the new video game being published by Saber Interactive and developed by Stormine Games and Epitome, which originally I thought Epitome had left the project, but apparently they haven't. They're still partnered with Stormine Games. The game studio that has left the project is Illogica, which was the first studio that was originally named when they announced the game back in 2022, like years ago. But apparently they changed partners and changed course, and I think that might have been a proper decision because a lot of the games in Illogica's repertoire haven't been very fitting of it looked very much like a left field kind of game for them. Like they did SpongeBob games, they did Hitman games and like Deus Ex games, but nothing that was extremely horror. So them changing direction by going with a different studio that was more familiar with horror was probably the best call they could have made. Speaking of the studio that they're using as developing the game now at this point is going to be Stormine Games, which previously worked on different franchises. One of the main ones that they're the most popular for seems to be the Remothered franchise. Now, the Remothered franchise, those previous entries in Stormine's catalog, have had a hit and miss kind of reputation with the gaming community, seeming to gain a lot of favorability between PlayStation and PC players, while Xbox and Switch players who later got access to the Remothered franchise kind of weren't super accepting of the franchise. That being said, it needs to be noted that Keiichiro Toyama, who is the creator of Silent Hill, I really hope I didn't butcher his name, expressed a huge admiration over Remothered and hoping for a collaboration with Chris Darrell, who was the game director of the franchise. While the Remothered franchise is more of a third-person horror perspective, reminiscent of the early day Resident Evil games and everything like that, they're definitely making a huge change of pace with The Quiet Place, heading into first-person horror. Now, in the last video that I made talking about this game, which was a whopping 2 years ago, it's been forever since they originally announced this game. Now that we know the full name and full game details, I'm actually making a video and talking about it like I said I would back then. I mentioned that this does have the potential to replace Alien Isolation as one of the best first-person survival horror games out there, and I don't seem to be wrong so far. I mean, the original announcement trailer, while it was in-game engine and not gameplay, did show a lot of promise with certain mechanics, using sound to distract the monsters, as well as a bunch of other different mechanics that are very Alien Isolation-like. While it's extremely unclear what specific mechanics will be included in the game, despite obvious stealth it being paramount and sound being a resource not to be used too heavily, the flashlights and other potential technology you can use without any interruption like you could in Alien Isolation. In Alien Isolation, you couldn't even have a flashlight on because the xenomorph could see it. The Quiet Place monsters don't rely on sight. So there is a lot of utility of tools that you didn't have access to in Alien Isolation, while also managing tools that misdirect everything on their own. A huge example being, not unlike the Alien Isolation motion tracker, a sound tracker, which is the device that's shown in the image that's being shown right in front of you. Originally, a lot of players saw this both as a tease of a mechanic, which I did too, and as well as just something interesting. It's important to break down what these devices actually are based on the research that I've done. So this is a ramshackle piece of technology that was thrown together between a decibel recorder and a decibel detector. So a decibel recorder and a decibel detector are usually items used during music, as well as just other uses in government or federal utility. But mainly, if you're seeing a common use for these devices, it's for music. Decibel recorders keep track of how loud a certain area or environment is, which is the blue meter on the left. The decibel recorder is the orange meter on the right, detecting your sound, detecting what you are compared to the environment. Ramshackle technology is not new to this franchise. In fact, the entire first movie, the father figure, John, was trying to figure out how to make a better hearing aid for his daughter the entire movie. So ramshackle technology is not new. It's nothing that isn't unintroduced. So people being able to be smart and creative and take two devices and mix them together in order to continue their levels of survival is absolutely paramount and absolutely understandable for the world that this franchise takes place in. It also needs to be noted that based on a lot of the in-game screenshots, I have some exclusive ones that aren't on the websites that were sent to me via the PR department at Stormine Games. Special thank you to Stormine Games for the press kit. One of the images I'm going to show you basically kind of confirms where this game takes place on the timeline. I say basically, but I don't know for sure. This is just a theory. Everything here is a theory at this point, but there is some concrete evidence to help support this, and it does involve spoilers for A Quiet Place Part 2, not Day 1. We'll get into Day 1 in a little bit. So if you have not seen A Quiet Place Part 2, please skip past this point and then skip again past this point if you haven't seen Day 1. So just be warned, because I'm going to transition from Part 2 to Day 1 in terms of topics and discussion. Discussing Part 2 and how that involves the story of this game, one of the screenshots that was sent via the press kit that wasn't used on the websites at all, mostly I think because it doesn't have the monster in the shot, is the survivor character that we're playing as stumbling upon a radio station. And this isn't like a radio station of, oh, it's barren, it's been worn down because, you know, the monsters hate sound, and like, you know, this isn't an abandoned radio station. It is a wood sign with the painted words radio station on it nailed on, which means that someone had ramshackled this place to be a radio station, possibly meaning that this game takes place after the events of Part 2, once they've decided to hook up the hearing aid to a broadcasting radio station, so that way everyone with a radio device has access to the weakening sound. It's possible that they're going for a Dying Light kind of save mechanic here, where these mechanics are hubs or save stations for them to be able to use to keep quiet, keep calm, and not have to worry about the monsters coming by, because the radio static or radio sound feedback that comes through would damage them or harm them. It would be a way of deterring them. So it's possible that these radio stations are save points or hubs. They might also be player hubs. We could be looking at crafting mechanics, just like Alien Isolation, how you could find scrap, liquor bottles, and everything else to make a Molotov, or flashbangs, or other pieces of equipment that you may need. We might be seeing a resurgence of that mechanic in A Quiet Place: The Road Ahead. It's also important that we need to address the monsters in this game. The monsters for A Quiet Place have always been shrouded in mystery. There's a lot about them that we still don't know. There's a lot more about them that we learned in A Quiet Place Day 1. This is where I will dive a little bit into the spoiler territory. Obviously, nothing huge plot-wise, so if you're going to see the movie, you don't have to worry too much about plot. But if you're more curious about the monsters, if you're like me who goes to these movies because the monsters are just insanely cool, extremely interesting, and you want to know more about the monsters, do not skip past this point, because I will discuss a little bit about the monsters and what we see of them in A Quiet Place Day 1 that may be crucial to the story of A Quiet Place: The Road Ahead. So please be warned, this is your final warning. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A Quiet Place Day 1 shows a very specific sequence and scene where Joseph Quinn's character Eric is going to try and find Lupita's cat. I believe her name was Sam. And her cat wanders into one of the original crash sites of the meteor from these Quiet Place monsters. You know, when they arrive on shards of their own world that have been destroyed, crash landing on Earth in a meteor shower. These meteors, according to what it looks like in the film, this is in Day 1, there is a globe that is briefly shown with different labels and different stickers on there of several different locations across the globe that have registered or addressed crashing zones, such as Denver, San Diego. They move on to say Shanghai, Russia. They just keep pushing on into different zones where these meteors have made substantial impacts and substantial, like, arrivals. New York being one of the main ones, considering how many of the monsters there are in this film. One of the key parts about this crash zone, though, is we do get to learn a little bit more about the monsters and their biology and their behavior. A lot of people originally thought that these monsters had a hive mind, which was later proven to be not true. They do have a sort of pack mentality, like living in groups. They don't have a hive mind. They don't share a consciousness, but rather they all are partnered together. They live like, the same way you would grasp lions or hyenas. They aren't fully aware of what each and every individual one is doing. Otherwise, there would be absolutely no, survival rate. Instead, the monsters are more of packs of 2 or 3 in certain locations at certain times, unless a large sound or larger sound directs the entire group towards that direction, which is a lot of what happens in A Quiet Place Day 1. During the sequence regarding Eric trying to save Sam's cat, they stumble upon one of the original crash zones, which introduces a weird sort of liquid and flora, that is all over the crash zone. These weird alien-like mushrooms, as well as a purple-ish like liquid. We don't know anything about any of these. Like, this is the very first introduction of any of this, but it is very clear and very well shown in the film that these mushrooms are the monster's feeding supply, which was something that we were curious about since the first movie, because a lot of the action involving the monsters hunting and killing things that made sound didn't involve them eating them. They would just slash them up and leave them, like leave the corpse. They would just, you're making a sound, kill it, and then run. They would never really be involved with eating or sustaining themselves. So it's clear that the meteors or the parts of their world that have crash landed came with a little bit of a care package and something to like help them survive on our environment. Obviously, like a source of food, clearly some sort of liquid. I'm not sure what the purple liquid is supposed to be. It's not like it was introduced in a fashion that made it seem like it was their water supply. Like I could guarantee you the fauna or the flora was their food supply. But the liquid was, that's unsure. It could just be part of the meteor. It was also interestingly shown that there is some level of alpha, at least from what I could tell, of these creatures. Not a queen, because like I said, this isn't a hive mind, but something that obviously is like a one above all kind of version of these monsters, because there is a brief sequence where Eric makes like just enough of a sound to get the attention of a monster without it actually charging, but the monster is like 2 or 3 times the size of what they normally are. Like normally they're like, obviously their wingspan and their arm size is a lot bigger than a normal human's, but their head, especially with the panels closed, is quite like equal sized, not super huge or anything like that. This monster, the one that appeared, showed to be like gigantic, showed to be really big, and you could hear the gravity of its footsteps, like it was big. So I don't know if that was an alpha. I don't know if that was something that would be, a new species or a subspecies of these monsters. It's clear that they don't fight each other. They're part of the same race. Like it's not the equivalent of like a lion and a tiger fighting each other. It is absolutely like they're fully aware that they're all the same. And whatever this big one is, it's clear that it's like taking care of the crash zone and taking care of their food supply and water supply and just kind of dictating the group that had landed in New York City. Now, it's unclear whether or not we're going to see these mechanics, like these new bits of information that they introduced in A Quiet Place Day 1 in the game. There is obviously no guarantee, and there's no way I could even know that. But it would be very interesting to learn more about these things, especially because they only appear in a brief scene. Like I said, it isn't plot relevant. It isn't something that's necessary for the movie. It's just something that they show to give a little bit of expansion on what these creatures are, how they behave, what their natural order is like, even though they're quite unnatural for our order. But it's just so intriguing. Like, the more we learn about these monsters, the more questions there are, which is something that really has been missed in franchises that I love, like Alien. You know, Alien had a lot of mystery and suspense drawn around the origin of the xenomorph, and now that we're kind of dipping into the origin of the xenomorph, we're kind of like losing the fear factor, losing the mystery and the suspense of this monster. Compared to the A Quiet Place monsters, this was the perfect prequel for them to absolutely say, oh, these monsters are this, and this is where they come from, and this is what they do. And they didn't. They gave us just enough information to learn more, but not enough to ruin the mystery and ruin the suspense of what these things are. And I'm very excited to see more on them, and I really want to know more about what they are. Like, I really hope A Quiet Place: The Road Ahead has some level of coverage when it comes to that. And while it's not much to go off of during the reveal trailer for the game, it is important to know that the website paints a new picture in terms of different in-game screenshots. Like I said, the one that I showed you before was one that wasn't on the website, so it was part of the PR press kit for me to be able to have access to. Again, huge shout out to Storemind Games for letting us have access to this. But the other screenshots that they show on the website show a lot more about what, like, the extreme detail in the monsters, making them look 100% film accurate, which is something that is really impressive. There are a lot of games that when they're trying to render in, you know, or adapt monsters from the films, you know, Alien Isolation included, there is a little bit lost in translation when it comes to trying to cross over the design of the monster. Obviously, Alien Isolation kind of nailed it. Their focus was to make the xenomorph as accurate as to the films as possible. But then there are other things like, you know, the Seegson androids, where they introduced Working Joes for the first time, and Working Joes were obviously a like much less detailed android. Obviously, with like lore wise, it's from a side company, but I'm sure from a game development perspective, they decided to put more attention to detail on the xenomorph, because that's the like main threat of of the movie and the game, while the androids didn't need that much detail. Neither did the people, you know, like they didn't have to go super hard on design. Versus this game, obviously they're taking a huge quality check on these monsters to make sure they're 100% accurate. That also being said, there are a lot of familiar and new locations shown. Obviously there's a lot, obviously there's a lot of stuff that relates to the original, like the first movie of them going into town, getting medicine, and then leaving. Weird gastric. And basically them going into town, getting bags of sand to be able to lay trails, obviously seems to be a mechanic. There's a bunch of different things that are familiar to us from the original first two movies, but also somewhat new settings that are interesting, diverse, and showing something that may be a new perspective in the world, because New York and Rhode Island were the main settings for the original movies, both Quiet Places 1 and 2 and Day 1. This looks like it's going to be in a completely different setting. It's possible that it may be in either Europe, or it may actually be in the West Coast, which is something that I would like to see, especially as a West Coaster myself. But let me know what you guys think. Are you guys excited for A Quiet Place: The Road Ahead? I have emailed Storemind Games myself, reaching out, hoping to learn more about this game. This franchise means so much to me. I have sedadophobia, which is a fear of silence. So this game is like, this franchise is one of my worst nightmares come to life, and I love it for that. It's like one of the few properties that could actually scare me anymore. So I reached out to Storemind in the hopes of getting some special content creator access. Hopefully me posting again more often will entice them into taking that offer, and I really want to hear back from them. I cannot be more excited for this game, especially after going to see A Quiet Place Day 1, which is in theaters today. So please, if you have the free time, if you have the free $7, $10, whatever money it costs for your local theater, please go see this movie. It deserves to be shown on the big screen, and you deserve to go see it, because it is probably one of the best horror films they've released this year. So if you don't believe me, please go to prove me wrong. Otherwise, please enjoy the film. And let me know in the comments below both what you think of the film, as well as what you think of my summary and analysis of Quiet Place: The Road Ahead. And as always, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye!